how could anything negative come from raising capital?
Brands take time to build. So there is an amount of money you can put in to grow them more quickly, but generally that makes a company unprofitable. And so even think of Lululemon, right? An amazing company, right? An amazing brand, amazing product-led company. I mean, that was 20 years in the making before any of us in the US had practically heard of Lululemon. Like it takes a really long, it's decades to build really sustainable brands. They don't come in 3 years or 5 years or even seven usually.
All right, guys. Heidi Zak, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Yes, happy to be here.
So the founder of ThirdLove, obviously industry disruptor. But before we get into that part of your journey, I want to kind of just share some quick value with the audience and would love to unpack what you've seen in your company today. And if we compare that to pre-COVID or even during COVID, some of the changes that you're feeling is happening maybe in the market shift or in the economy that you can just shed some light on for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been years of changing tides, I would say. And I think even today, the consumer is just the consumer spending, but potentially on different things than what he or she was spending on before. So I think as, as an apparel company, and, obviously we're a bra company, but I think of ourselves more broadly in apparel. I think back to kind of the changes that happened during COVID, where we really saw that shift into, well, what's someone wearing at home? For us, that meant wireless bras. For us, that meant loungewear, right? All those comfy things. After, kind of in the past 2 years, we've really seen some of that shift back into wired. But I think what we see today more than anything is that, to get a customer to buy products, you really have to be creating a need for the here and now, because otherwise the customer can wait. So I think that's a challenge that we're all facing, right? It's how to communicate a sense of urgency around trying something new or purchasing something new. Because I get the sense, and again, this is just what we see and like what I see in the broader market, that the consumer today is more just waiting a little bit longer to maybe try something, to buy something, and is maybe saving that money to spend on something outside of a consumer product.
So that's interesting. So you're seeing that change. What are you doing proactively? Because that's obviously driving down your buying frequency. That's going to reduce your lifetime customer value. How are you creating urgency? Because obviously bras, people are like, well, I'll just run this one out. Nobody sees it, right?
No, and that therein, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, that therein, we talk about that all the time at ThirdLove. I mean, we've really high quality products that last a long time. One is, new product development and launches. So we've really speeded up the pace of style drops. We're still not fast fashion, but much faster than we used to drop products. So, this year alone, in the past 3 months, we've dropped 4 new bra styles. That's a lot for us. So that does really create more of a sense of urgency around a new product. So for example, for us, like a front closure or racer back, which is great for spring, summer. We just dropped our new wireless last week, which is a fantastic new updated wireless bra. So really, I think innovation or creating that need for the customer to come back to buy something new is highly important. That's really both for new and repeat customers. And then, we're about to launch a loyalty program. So that's something we heard from our customer base, that she really wants to get, quote unquote, rewarded, right, for shopping with us. But I think it builds a deeper connection. So we're really excited to launch that program later in Q2. And I do think that'll drive an increased ability to get that repeat customer to come back more frequently.
I love that. I love that. So you're being super intentional. And I like how that, I feel like a lot of established companies do this, and smaller businesses just haven't developed the acumen to do this yet, but you see the market shifting, you see consumer buying habits shifting, and you're being proactive in trying to like right that ship before it causes a problem. Now, was that also your expansion, like you into Neiman and a lot of other like high-end retailers? Was that intentional for just distribution and brand awareness, or was it also so that you can strategically align these launches with that new distribution channel?
It was kind of a separate, it's the former, what you said. So for us, it's really thinking about, I mean, we are 98% through thirdlove.com, our revenue. So we are a true D2C brand, but really what I've learned over the years is I was the first one to say in the early days of ThirdLove, we'll never sell in physical retail. Like no woman wants to go to the store to buy a bra. And really what I've uncovered through, the research we've done and talking to as many women as possible is like, there are going to be women buy bras in different ways. And so we don't want to hinder her ability to try ThirdLove because she doesn't want to buy that first bra online and she's worried. I get it. It's hard to find a bra that fits. That's why I started ThirdLove. But in essence, having those partnerships with other brands that will uphold the high level of service that we offer is hugely important to us. And so Neiman's was an example of a partner that, when you walk into a Neiman's, you're going to get a high level of service. So they're going to help you find what's best for you. So as we partner with other companies, that's really sort of how I'm thinking about it. It doesn't matter whether it's in-store or online, but is that experience level going to match what we provide at thirdlove.com in its own way? And Neiman certainly does. So we're really excited to be working with them.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity. And just even the brand awareness of it, right? Like you said, they may not want to buy right away, or it just might be that they saw you in a different light now that they see you in Neiman.
Exactly.
And I know that we've got listeners or viewers that are watching this or listening to this going, okay, but how, right? Like I have an incredible product, or I want to get a Net-a-Porter or Neiman or Nordstrom's. What does that look like? And I can obviously tell by talking to you that this was not your first build and you have a very level of business development and acumen in the way that you talk. So did you already have connections at Neiman? How did that whole thing come up if somebody wants to start to explore those conversations?
Yeah, I think the best way to approach it, I mean, we're still really scrappy at ThirdLove. So yes, I mean, it is different because we are a well-known brand in the intimate space. And we've talked to different buyers at a lot of wholesalers over the years. And we were in Bloomingdale's even back in 2015 in the early days of ThirdLove. And then we kind of left as the D2C business was growing and we couldn't manage. We honestly didn't have the team and the resources to manage wholesale, which I think is a thing that smaller businesses do struggle with. There's a lot of little things that need to be done for wholesale. There's a lot of compliance. And you have to be really thoughtful and careful about that because otherwise it can come back and bite you the wrong way. So for us, the time was right. And so we reached out to different contacts we knew, but I am a big fan also of the cold email. And I do it all the time for different partnerships and things. I'm not above it today. I use platforms like Rocket Reach to get someone's email and I try to draft something that is really enticing and interesting and give someone a reason to say, yeah, like I want to have a chat. And so I think there's nothing better than the founder reaching out to somebody directly and trying to establish that connection. And so usually that's what I will do is kind of go out myself and try to find the right contact.
Oh my gosh, I love you. And I love that you shared that because I think that here you are with this massive company. I can't even imagine the valuation that you have right now, but you're still the one going out. If you're like, I want to know who that person is, you're going to go on, you're going to find that person and you're going to cold outreach them.
Totally. I do it a lot. And I mean, I also use first I would say use your network, right? Of course, go onto LinkedIn, see the usual stuff, see who you're connected to. But yeah, I mean, I won't say which company. It wasn't Neiman's, it's another company. And I'm really intent on getting ThirdLove into this store. And I have been like nonstop. And I finally found the right person and I got through and they said no, but I'm not taking no for an answer. And like, I'll keep reaching out every couple of months. Like, I think you got to hustle like as a founder, as a business owner. And like, yeah, someone says no now, but it's just like, that's just no today, right? Like, that's not no forever. It's just no for some reason today. It's not the right fit. Well, okay, great. Like maybe it will be the right fit in 3 months or 6 months. So like, I think always kind of following up, keeping someone apprised of like what's new, with your product development or anything else that's going on with your business, because all businesses are changing. It's an incredibly dynamic market going back to what we were talking about originally. So like what's true today isn't going to be true in 6 months. So like not getting, I get it. It's super disappointing when you want something and someone says no, like we all feel like that. But I think really just saying like, I'm going to come back to it. Like I have faith that at some point, like if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. So keep reaching out.
And do you tee that up in your emails? Like you reach out to some buyer from this store that you went into and they're like, sorry, Heidi, it's a no. Do you
Yeah.
tee that up and just say, okay, great, Bob, but I'm going to reach back out to you in 6 months?
Yeah, or I don't even say that and I just reach back out. I'm like, hey, it's me again. How's it going? Do you have time?
Yeah.
Just like catch up, what's going on? Like I said, I think, and or oftentimes buyers will change too. So that's always something else, right? Like there's definitely companies where there's a real consistency of, leadership in certain groups. And then other times things are changing. So it's, people may be different as well. So that could open a door for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about everybody here is like, oh, that's great. You've had great success. You've had great luck, people think, but it's really just a lot of hard work and a lot of failures and continuing and not stopping. Is there maybe anything looking back in your journey, and maybe it wasn't just with ThirdLove, maybe it was prior, that you're like, oh my gosh, this one moment almost crippled me. This almost made sure ThirdLove didn't happen. Do you have any mistakes or challenges along the way that you think back was like maybe a tipping point of why you're here?
I mean, there's a lot. I think one of the ones in the early days of the company was we had our basically our number one seller, our t-shirt bra. We had this one bra and women who bought it really loved it. And so we knew we had this product that women loved, but we couldn't figure out how to market it. And I remember kind of sitting around, we were probably 10 people at the time, and we were sitting around being like, look, like we weren't making money at the time. And we're like, if we can't figure out how to sell this thing, which in Silicon Valley terms, whatever is product market fit. But in essence, it's right. Like, can you actually sell your product to people that want it? Right.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting around being like, if we can't figure out how to get women to try this bra, and ThirdLove was nothing at this point. So no one knew who we were. We weren't a brand name, right? There was no referrals to be had because there was only probably a couple thousand women that had our bra at that point in time. And so we sat around, we're like, you know what it is? It's that nobody believes us, right? Like when we say it's the most comfortable bra, you won't feel like you're wearing it. Women are like, yeah, right. I've been wearing terrible bras forever. And like, I don't believe you, right? And who are you anyway, ThirdLove? Never heard of you. And I'm buying a bra online. So there was like a bunch of things, right? If you think of all the reasons why someone would be like, I'm not doing this. And we're like, well, what if we just did something radical and like sold it to them and didn't charge them and just let them wear it first? And this turned into this idea of like, try before you buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we basically said, it's kind of crazy, but we'll ship the bra to somebody. They can pay $2.99 for shipping. And if they can wear it, take the tags off, wear it, wash it. And if they love it, keep it and pay for it. But if not, like we'll pay for return shipping and take it back. So there's big risk in that, huge risk. Like if people didn't keep the bra, it really actually could have pushed us over the edge to like not being here. And, thankfully it worked. And it worked to get people to try it, and women also loved it like we thought they would. And so it all worked out. But sometimes you have to really do pretty bold things and differentiate yourself within the market to stand out. Now, today, like other companies, even Amazon has their own version of like try before you buy. So today, people listening are like, oh, well, that's not, maybe a lot of people do that. Well, I think we were one of the first, if not the first, who actually did that kind of program. So, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other times too, but that was definitely one in the early days where it was like either this works or we're not going to be here.
Wow. Do you have any recollection of approximately how many you sent out to try before you buy?
Oh, you mean like over the time of that
Units.
program?
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we sold millions.
Wow.
Like
So you just sent them out and just literally, I mean, though, to me, that's the moment in business where you're like, oh man, I hope I'm right. Because if
yeah,
not, if you were wrong, right, and nobody liked this bra and it wasn't as amazing, because sometimes we get, our
totally.
entrepreneurs, we get in our head that it's better than it is. So that could have been the moment where you were like, that would have been an oh shit moment where it didn't
Totally.
work and it could have
I mean,
crippled the company.
yeah, we were looking at the data. And so we had basically said, we called it like the keep rate. Like we needed the amount of women who kept it to be like over 70%, I think it was. And so there was real risk. And then once we saw the numbers coming back that were better than that, we're like, let's just like scale this program. And I mean, we ran it for years. I mean, it was really, if any, most women out there who tried us in the early days of ThirdLove, like I would say, 2016 through 2017 for sure, probably there's a high likelihood they use that program to try us for the first time.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
this is interesting because I don't remember the exact moment that our team reached out to you. But the very first time I heard of ThirdLove was, I'm also a nonprofit founder. And so we reach out to a bunch of brands to do silent auction items and stuff.
Yeah.
And you guys donated to our little nonprofit for one of our events. And I remember like being there with all the staff and the volunteer, and I was like, what is this ThirdLove? And they're like, oh, it's bras. And then one of the girls, who reached out and got it from the company, was like, I was actually on their site and I ordered one. So your 250, whatever it was, donation to us literally created this whole nucleus of customers that in essence got to then try before we bought, right? Like we heard of it for the first time. Then the person that won that silent auction item that donated got it. And so I think it just speaks to, even when you're an online brand or you're D2C, like there's so many other ways that you can intimately and physically touch people to try your products. And so I love that, like, that one thing, and now I know you've gone on to do millions and millions of that and give so much to charity, but it's interesting how that one thing can bring you customers in order to try. Now, there might be people listening that says, well, okay, that's really great that you guys shipped out all of this, try before you buy, but I don't have the funds to do that. I don't have the money to do that in my business. One, were you fundraising at that time? Is that what gave you the ability to do it? And two, if so, how could someone in a small business that maybe doesn't have access to capital use some of these levers in their business to maybe grow into new markets?
Yeah. Yeah, no, we were fortunate, or, reflecting back, unfortunate. I mean, it depends how you view it today, like hindsight's 2020, right? That we had raised money, but also what came from raising money is like, you need to grow. And you need to grow pretty quickly. Therein lies sort of the trap some brands got caught in. And so, that did put more pressure on us, and we had to think about creating something. But in the end, I think, that worked out well for us.
Okay,
Look,
wait, unpack that, because I know that people listening are going to be like, wait, what is she saying?
Okay.
I always say investors create responsibilities. And that's why I always caution people to bring on capital too early. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And somebody listening thinking, wait, how could anything negative come from raising capital? Can you just unpack that a little bit deeper for us?
Yeah. And it's, I talk to a lot of early stage founders who reach out to me, and business owners. And I many, many, many times say, especially if they're making money, which most I would say that I talk to, I'm like, nope, like go sell 1 million more and then think about it. Like whatever you're doing. Right. So, there's the idea of taking in money, but when you take in money, you give up ownership of your company. Right. So that's point one, is that if today you own 100% and you take in, it doesn't matter what the amount is, at some point you're going to own less than that. And so you have to think through what that, means, both and you have additional owners around the table, and those owners, they may have differing expectations for you, or they may want to see you grow at a certain pace or exit in a certain time frame. And so it just creates another voice around the table. And it's super important that you listen to that voice, because you've now brought them into your family with you, your company family. And so it's a lot more to manage, and there's a lot more expectations, and there are pros and cons of doing it. But certainly in consumer products, like at the end of the day, what we know today is like brands take time to build. There's no amount of money you can put in that. Yes, well, I should say there is an amount of money you can put in to grow them more quickly, but generally that makes a company unprofitable. And so even think of Lululemon, right? An amazing company, right? An amazing brand, amazing product-led company. I mean, that was 20 years in the making before any of us in the US had practically heard of Lululemon. Like it takes it's decades to build really sustainable brands. They don't come in 3 years or 5 years or even 7, usually. There's a few outliers. So I just think for most consumer companies, really trying to be really cautious with investments in the early days is helpful, because it allows you to scale at your own pace and figure things out along the way. And then there's a time for everything where it makes a lot more sense. Now that's my personal thought, having done it.
And where do you think it makes most sense for most people to think of that?
Yeah, I think when you're bigger. So I think, as I joke, like go sell another million, go sell another 5 million, whatever the number is. Once you get to a certain scale, sometimes it can make sense then to bring in more capital to grow a lot more quickly, to, I don't know, hire a sales or distribution, a sales force to get better distribution. There's a lot of things you can do at a certain point that can really speed up your trajectory of growth, where more headcount or more money you're putting in is creating, a straight up into the right for you. And that might also be a time, if you don't want to manage that kind of business, it's a great time to potentially even sell it, or, partially sell it, right? And have someone else come in and lead it, because at that point you're dealing with a bigger company and more process. And there's just a lot of things that come with scale that, for a lot, maybe not all, but most founders don't like that at some point. There's this inflection point of being like, all those things I used to love to do, the company doesn't run like that anymore.
Yes.
And I don't like what I do every day now. So like, I want to go do the thing over here where I was like creating and moving fast and all these things, and not sort of like running a mid-sized company or larger.
You're 100% right. I see so many entrepreneurs, they actually love that beginning stage where there's a lot of things going on and it's ideation and it's proof of concept. And then it's almost like once they get to even, I've seen it 3 million, 10 million, it's kind of like now they have to develop systems, processes, people, and it's kind of like womp womp. Like nobody really likes, because whatever you enjoyed in the beginning, unless for you it's about the journey of either getting to an IPO or exiting or whatever, most people kind of fizzle out in their excitement. What keeps you still involved now in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I say is I learn every day, right? I'm still today learning, doing different things than I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, part of that again is market dynamics and sort of just all the things that we're all going through. And two is like, I love the brand and the company and what we do. And so, that's what I'm so thankful for our customers. I hear from customers each and every day. That's really what drives me to develop new products, to launch new things, to continue to grow, and see how we can continue to make an impact. So I still have energy every single day, but look, like I'm over 10 years in, like, it's a part of it was me realizing it was a marathon, right? And not a sprint, because you can't maintain the same pace. Like I certainly couldn't maintain the same pace I did probably in the first 3 years of ThirdLove today, because it is more of a journey. So I think it's at some point you have to balance your style of work too, if you're going to be in it for the longer term.
Yeah. 100% agree. Because otherwise you burn out. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs think they can just keep up that pace, but you 100% have to be intentional. And speaking of intentional, you basically came into an industry that had a very few people that dominated. You're coming in as an industry disruptor. You are a team of 10 thinking, okay, this is our do or die moment. We need at least 70% to keep these bras. How intentional were you about the selection of what you're selling, the way that you distribute it, built it? Do you have an end game that you want to get to? How intentional have you been in the build of this whole company?
So in the early days, like extremely intentional. And that's another piece of advice I give all the time. It's very easy to get excited about the next shiny object of like what you are going to do or what you'd like to do or what, 100 of your customers told you they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the same answer, which was go sell another 1 million of the thing you're selling today. Right. So because there's, usually you need to go focus on the one core product. And also what I've learned along the way, it's a lot easier to sell one product. If I only had to sell one, which we basically did at ThirdLove for a couple of years, we sold our t-shirt bra, which is still our number one bra. But at the time, that was pretty much, I'm not going to say the only thing we sold, but pretty much the only thing we sold. It was really easy to market because it was one product. So you can test and iterate. You can really find what drives someone to make that purchase. And you can create funnels. And by that, I mean just a really direct selling process. So for us, it was come to ThirdLove, do our fitting room, which was our fit tool. After you do the fitting tool, we'll give you this option to try before you buy. And it was a very seamless kind of end-to-end experience for the customer. And that was the main thing we did for years. And it worked really well. And I think when you try to do a lot of things all at once, a couple of things happen. One, the product quality can get out of whack, if your team or, your production partners can't handle it, which oftentimes happens to smaller companies. And if you don't have your quality and you don't have the product, then no one's going to like it. And then you won't have a company in the future. So like every product you put out has to be upheld to your personal and brand standards. So yeah, I think focus. Most where people go wrong is by not focusing.
I love it. It's like the shiny, my second book that's coming out. I literally have a whole chapter in there about this. So like, I love that you're speaking this because you're speaking my language. It's like shiny object syndrome. It's like, oh, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And it's like, as hard as it is for the entrepreneur, the more unilateral your focus is, as opposed to going wide, your team, your user experience, but also your money. Like it
Totally.
is so much more expensive to create all of these additional assets and products and, ancillary revenue streams, as opposed to like, this is our one, we're putting our nail on the cross right here. This is who we are and what we are. And then you can kind of develop once you have sustainability, well, at least viability in the market in order to sustain. So I love how intentional that you were in that. And I'm not 100% sure. Did you co-found this with your husband?
I did. Yeah.
How is that dynamic?
It was great for us. I mean, we're still married. We had 2
You're
kids
like, we're still married, so it's good. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, he took a chairman role 2 years ago. He's one of these people who epitomizes early stage. He loves that. That's where the excitement is. And so, at some point it was time for him to go off and do a new thing. But yeah, no, I mean, we did it together. It started out of our living room, the two of us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And what gave you the idea? I know you said you were so intentional. So was the fact that you chose this industry to disrupt, was that also intentional? Did you see a lane in order to kind of come into?
Yeah. And I mean, I saw a lot of different lanes for a lot of things that I was like, oh, and then I would do the research and be like, man, that's not a good idea. Or somebody else is doing
Can you
it.
share what other thoughts you had?
I honestly I can't even remember because this is, 12 years. I just would come home. I don't know. I would come home and I'd be like, oh, I'd have this idea, but then I'd get online and I'd be like, oh, someone's doing it or like I'd look at the market size and be like, well, it's not like that big of a market.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are kind of the natural things that happen. And I can't specifically remember like what there was a bunch though. But this one was based on a bra shopping trip and I had been bra shopping and I'm not some like lingerie aficionado. Like people always ask me that. I'm just like a normal woman. I probably buy bras once a year, like most people do. And I was in a Victoria's Secret store. And when I walked out of there after another terrible shopping experience, I was like, why am I spending money here? Why am I doing this? Why am I physically going to the store? And then when I came home and did the research, it's a huge market. There was one huge dominant player who really hadn't innovated or changed at all over the past 20 years. And the main distribution channel for women buying a bra was still in store. And so that was really, as I looked at all those pieces, really said, I think this could be something big. And my husband at the time was working for a firm and working on a lot of e-commerce initiatives. And then when we started researching it, he's like, yeah, I think you're right. Like there's really something here. And that's really how it came to be. So it was very intentional, but it randomly came to me, right? Like it wasn't like I was sitting doing the research. It was definitely like something that came to me after I was shopping.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how intentional you were too about researching the market, seeing how noisy the space is, like making sure that the industry size could support whatever your ultimate goal was at the time. And what is that? If you could share, maybe shed some light on, you're 12 years in, you're still sitting as CEO, correct?
Yep.
So you're still serving as CEO, your husband's more in a chairman role. How do you see the evolution of the next phase of ThirdLove as you start to encroach on that 20-year, like we were talking about with Lululemon?
Yeah, crazy. I mean, continuing to build the brand. I mean, a part of our strategy is really around distribution, like we talked about. So I think for us, it's the couple of things I talked about that we are doing today is expanding our product range. We have swim, we have sports bras. So as we think about where we can own fit and deliver a better experience for a customer, that's where we will go. And so I think continuing that expansion is really crucial, to our success as a brand and servicing our customer. And then, yeah, thinking about all the places where she might shop and meeting her there. another really, really important thing. And those are two very different things than we did the first, we didn't launch until like the end of 2014, 2015, because we built our own front end. Shopify basically didn't exist. Like if we
Yeah,
go back in time, and
you're
it's
right.
great, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we were in a totally different world back then. But yeah, so I think really thinking about doing things differently, the next 8 years looks very different than the past 8 did, for sure, in terms of just the brand, the product, and distribution.
Oh my gosh. And I just have to touch on the e-commerce thing because I was doing e-commerce in 2013, 14 in that range. There was no Shopify and it was so janky. Like you had to have developers code every single thing, like every button to every order cart. I mean, it has obviously come such a long way in 10 years, but that was an experience.
Yeah,
And you've obviously, I mean, you've Fortune's 40 under 40, you were Ernest & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, you've had so many accolades, and yet you still remain so down to earth and approachable, and like you're still making these emails on your own. How did that become the CEO that you are? Like so often we talk to CEOs and founders that have accumulated a lot of wealth and success, and they hold themselves in a different lane. And you obviously have been also intentional about just being Heidi.
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Heidi before ThirdLove. What was your experience? What were your parents like? What was kind of your environment that created you to be who you are, not what you do?
Totally. I think that's a question everyone should ask in a job interview. That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small town. So I grew up in a small town outside of Niagara Falls with 3,000 people. I mean, my first job was on a farm, basically at a farmer's market. And when I was 14. And so I think that I always had a high work ethic that my parents really instilled in me. And I did competitive gymnastics like 20 hours a week growing up on top of everything else. So if you think about I think I was always really just busy, right? And doing a lot of things. And after college, I kind of went the traditional route of like banking and consulting and different things. And I wasn't passionate about that. And so when I got out of business school, I went and worked for a retail company in New York. And that was really a time where I was like, this is really cool. There's a product, there's a consumer, and we're deeply entrenched in different moments in time. And I never lost that kind of desire to kind of always connect with customers, I guess, since then. But yeah, I mean, I think that authenticity is really important. And it's something I think I struggled with at the beginning of ThirdLove when I mostly was around men, tech, tech bros. I think that's like, all I really saw back in the day when we started at ThirdLove. And I remember thinking, oh, I need to act a certain way and talk just a certain way and all of this stuff. And then I finally realized, I don't even know how, that when I was just who I was, whether that was at a company all hands or in an investor meeting or whatever I was doing on, in an interview, everything was way better. Just right. And so I think there's just something about when you get really comfortable in who you are, people are much more comfortable too, and you can move people in the right direction. And so I think you can lead in a lot of different ways and be super successful leading in a lot of ways. And there isn't one size fits all, kind of like ThirdLove. It's like this idea, like everyone's unique, use your strengths, be who you are. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think when you have confidence in that, everything else falls into place. Trying to be something you're not is never going to work. Just not.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Are your parents still alive?
Yeah.
What do they think about all the success that you've had at ThirdLove?
I think they're really proud. My dad kind of started, bought a business later in life when I was in college. And so he's an entrepreneur in his own way, which is, so, it's kind of an interesting story because people are like, oh, you must have had parents who, I'm like, not really, but actually kind of later in life. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. And a lot of people that hear your story now, they think, okay, somebody has a really big company. They've accumulated a lot of wealth. They've had a lot of success. You can make a lot of mistakes because you can mitigate risk, right? But the earlier stage entrepreneurs that don't have a lot of profit and they haven't created a lot of wealth they don't have the liberty to create as much risk and take those big leaps because they have family to feed. They have all of these things. one, I want to know, what would you say to that entrepreneur that's like, you know what, I'm not 100% sure where to go or what to turn to in order to try to make this work? Is there maybe a piece of advice or inspiration that you can give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I would argue that even when you get bigger as a company, it's hard to take risk, right? Because today's environment, like you need to be profitable. And so, the risks you can take or are willing to take in a certain environment is narrows to some extent too. So but the thing is today compared to 10 years ago, for anyone who's at least selling online, right? And retail is its own host of things, meaning physical retail, but there's just a lot of ways to be scrappy. And the reason any small business owner is successful today, whoever is listening or whatever, is because you're scrappy and you think outside the box and you figure out how to do things, even when other people can't, like you do it, right? And so I think there's ways to test and learn that aren't like risking everything.
Mhm.
So that's what I would say back is that I generally think there's a way to say, okay, like even we're talking about some partnership thing we might do here. And I'm like, we got to test it in a smaller way, test and make sure it works before we launch it in a bigger way. So what are those little things you can do to say, how could I get insight into something that may or may not work and try to do that first before you mortgage your house, right? Like you want to have
Right.
confidence in it.
Yeah.
But I do think there's many more like platforms and methods or ways to get smaller runs of product today,
Mhm.
even than ever before. So like, what are those ways we can get the information we need to make better decisions to take bigger risks? Like we all should be doing that.
I love that. And for that same person that's thinking, because I saw this question is twofold, for the person that thinks that you don't have as much risk, maybe now because you've had this level of success, what are some of the things that you worry about, even now as a CEO of a huge company, the growth trajectory that you're on? What's maybe some of your greatest concerns?
I mean, continuing to innovate is a big one. So like we were the industry disruptor, right? In 2014, when we launched, we were one of the only online broadbands. Today, there's probably 250 on, I don't know how many,
Mhm.
200 broadbands, right? So we kind of opened the door for others to enter to say, oh, you could do this. That creates competition. That's great for the consumer and it's great, but we have to continue to remain innovative, right? So it's like, it's funny, we're not like the new kids on the block anymore. And that has its own host of challenges as you think about like our company growth and continued pace of innovation. So it's like it doesn't end. There's different challenges at every point, right? I always say there's it becomes a little more regulated. There's not the crazy up and down you deal with like in the early days.
Mhm.
They become a little more muted, but there is still the bumps. It's not just like straight up to the right. It isn't like that for anyone at any point. Like there's always challenges. And what separates, true leaders from not is like you roll with that, you don't freak out, and you kind of do what we said, which is like, I figured out things before. I've gotten through hard things. I can do this hard thing. And there'll come a time when I'll reflect back on this and have learned something from it. And the more you do that, the more you realize, oh, I can do it, but it's still hard. It's still
Mhm.
challenging. So it doesn't stop.
It's so true. And I think people maybe underestimate you. I mean, you've gotten that term industry disruptor, but there's a lot of weight with that too. Like, oh, that's such a great like badge to wear, right? Like we disrupted the industry of lingerie, but I also feel like there's a lot of weight to continue to show up in a certain way. Do you ever feel that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I certainly do. And like I said, I think it's like, what does that mean? What does
Yeah.
that mean for us today that's different than it was 5 years ago? I mean, the market is different. What is disruption? What does that mean? What's the path forward to that? But for sure, yeah. And of course, bigger teams, bigger customer base, everything's bigger, there's more responsibility.
Yeah. I love that. Oh my gosh. I loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you forever. And there's so many other things I want to talk about, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I always have one final question that we ask everyone. And so if you didn't hear it before, basically imagine tomorrow that you woke up And ThirdLove, as it exists today, does not have the millions of customers and millions of revenue. And all of a sudden, the platform is down. You've lost everything. Every dollar in your bank account is gone. Nobody's going to pick up your call because they know your name. But the only thing you get to retain is the information that you've acquired throughout this build. Tomorrow, you got a mortgage, you got a family to feed. Everything's on your shoulders to start to build it back. What would you start to do tomorrow with zero money, zero contacts, and just the information in your brain?
Specifically, like what would I do?
Yeah, what would you start doing tomorrow morning?
Oh, well, the first thing I would do is say, where do I think there's a real need and where is the world going? Like, that's what I would ask myself, meaning, because if I'm answering this question, it's sort of like, I'm today, I'm not 10 years ago, right?
Correct,
So
today, yeah.
I'm in 2024 and the world is radically different than it was 10 years ago. So the first thing I would do is say, I'm going to take some time. Hard to do.
Yes.
I'm going to take a beat and really take a step back and say, like, where are the areas of either, like I said, growth? Where are these market shifts happening? And where are some like real consumer pain points that are happening? And where do I think I could potentially solve something again? But I would take time to really, I would at least take a couple weeks and really think through a variety of things, maybe even a month. Like, I wouldn't like run into something. I'd really take some time to do some research. And you know what the amazing thing is, I'd actually have this weirdly, that would be terrible what you just described. But the amazing thing about it that like actually gives me energy when you were talking, I was like, I have no baggage. Like there's nothing that I have that I have to work on top of. When you are starting fresh, like you can create something in any way, shape, or form you want. And I think there's a real excitement to that. I mean, just the world is so different today, like all the things and all the platforms and just like everything we were talking about. It's just there's a real freedom to be able to build something from scratch.
Would it be product again, do you think?
It would probably be product, but specifically, no, I think well, maybe, but I would not do apparel. I'm really interested in
Why?
wellness. I think apparel is just really hard. I think retail is very cyclical and
It is.
and it's the devil, you know. Like it's just even angel investing. I can barely angel invest in retail. It's just really hard, and I know it too well.
Yeah.
And I would not do something in apparel. I am really passionate about like wellness, longevity. I think there's some really interesting things going on in that space. And I would do something within that as like the broad box I was working in.
Very cool. I love
Yeah.
that. Do you think it's more this whole like space that's coming on with like longevity and anti-aging and just kind of people trying to hack their own systems and live longer? Is that what you're kind of seeing?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think because
I
I
love
think
that.
what we know today, and I read a good amount about it. I'm no expert, but it's like we're all super different, stating the obvious. So this idea of like personalization again, as it relates to your own longevity, like your DNA makeup, your who you are. There's a lot we're still learning, but right, like what works for me specifically might not work for you, won't work for someone else. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in that space. I don't know how it all shakes out, but yeah, no, there's a lot of innovation happening right now, and we're all going to live, knock on wood, a lot longer and longer, but it's really about quality of life, right? And so how do you maintain that quality of life? And yeah, so I think that's where I'd spend more time.
That's really cool. That's interesting. I love that because I love to just kind of unpack like a lot has changed in 10 years, right? And like you said, apparel is so different. I feel like there's so many new little, not pop-ups, but little companies popped up with maybe one product or 10 products or just a really small sampling that is kind of creating a lot of noise and diversifying attention. And so that's really fascinating. And I see that too. And I think what's really interesting is all of your customer base being all women, they are also super going to be interested to hack their hormones and their right as we continue to like we hear these words like perimenopause and menopause, like all these things that I think people are trying to understand more how to like live better through their later years. And so I think that's fascinating how that could possibly even tie all together at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm like, do I get
Yes.
the ThirdLove customer list with when this happens?
Yes, exactly.
What are the details? I need to know.
We need all the things to know what we're starting with. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Heidi, this was so great. Thank you so much for your time. Please let everyone know, how can they find out more about you, engage with you? Where are all of the things Heidi Zak?
Yeah, I'm just at Heidi on Instagram, and I'm Heidi
Okay.
Zak on LinkedIn. So I post different types of content. Those are probably the two main channels. And then yeah, our website's thirdlove.com. We have a couple of our own stores, and we're in Neiman Marcus. So that's the latest and greatest.
Where's your locations?
We are in Philly, we're all over Philly, Tyson's
Okay.
Corner, Boca, we're in
Okay.
Scottsdale, in Paradise
Awesome.
Valley. We are in Fashion Island, Newport Beach, two stores in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and then Neiman Marcus, we're in Dallas,
Oliver.
Coral Gables, and Atlanta.
Oh, amazing. That's great. I'll have to look. I did not know you were here, so I'll have to look you up.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was such an honor, and I just really enjoyed your time today. Thank you
It
for
was so
being
much
here.
fun.